Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to make a video showing the ins and outs of my new plugin, BSA Reviver. So what it is, how it works, and why I made it. In the last 2 months since it launched, there have been hundreds of great reviews and testimonials, and also lots of great questions. So in this video, I hope to dive into the details a little bit and answer as many of those as possible. So let's just get right into it. Firstly, something I didn't make clear last time is there's absolutely a free trial for BSA Reviver. You can grab it for 2 weeks. It's fully featured, so there's no noise or hiss or dropouts or anything like that. I'm really confident you're going to enjoy using it. So there's a free trial so that you don't have to take my word for it or even listen to any sound demos. You can just try it on your own music and see if you like it. Of course, I've linked this trial page in the description along with the product page. And if you do decide you want to get it, it's on sale for the next week. I've put a code in the description box. We're doing a little bit of a summer sale for anyone that missed the launch promo. Just before we dive into the plugin, I want to show you the product page just a little bit more because there are loads of sound demos here. I've recorded a bunch of videos on guitars, drums, full mixes. You can see I've got lots of before and after videos if that's what you're interested in. There's a bunch of them linked there. They're on YouTube. That's where you're going to be able to hear them in high quality. There's also more information about the plugin. Shows you a little bit of the interface. So there's loads of information on that page if you want to dive through it, but let's just open this up in the DAW and take a good look at it. So with it loaded up here, this is my plugin. It is a multi-band transient designer with some optional harmonic processing. And one of the biggest things I wanted to clear up right away was that this is not a multi-band compressor and it doesn't use any EQ. I understand where this confusion comes from, because it's split into bands or modules, low, mid, and high. But apart from the filters which split those modules, there's no EQ in the design. So this is not an EQ boost, and there's no sort of OTT or sound goodizing. It's all based around adaptive transient processing and some harmonic processing. Of course, you can use this on individual tracks and full mixes. First example here I've got is on a full mix. We'll listen to this low module. If I just engage this EQ here, this is what the low module is listening to, so this one here. It's from about 0 Hz to 250, but the processing is really focused on 60 Hz and ignores the stuff closer to 100 and 200, because I find that's not very good when you start transient designing in that area. Things start sounding very muddy. So if I turn this off, and we can go back to the plugin. As I push this, and I'll push it way too far, you'll hear that the kicks get a whole lot more punch, sound really nice and subby and punchy, but the bass is not being pulled up too much, so it shouldn't sound too muddy, even though I'm going to push this really, really far. So one of the bits of feedback I got in my last video was, why didn't I just crank the dials up all the way? And the reality is you don't usually need to. Of course, 100% was too much there, but I understand that as feedback. So now I'm just cranking it all the way up. Even just dialing in a little bit, you can get a lot more punch out of those kicks, but you're not having to spend any time setting compressor ratios, attack, release, thresholds, listening for any distortions or issues with that sort of pumping with the track wrong. You just turn this up. It adapts and it listens out for those transients and it tries to boost them in those regions, and you either like the result or you don't. That's why I designed this without lots of analyzers and waveforms jumping about the display. I wanted to make sure that when I used it and when anyone else used it, that you're turning it up and you can be really honest with yourself and say, yep, I like that, or no, I don't, I'll dial that back a little bit based on what you're hearing and not what you're seeing. So this mid band here, if I go back over to the EQ, of course I'm just using Pro Q3 to show what it's going to roughly sound like, but where this band was acting from was about 250 Hz to about 2.6K. So let me dial this in, and all the filters were linear phase and very gentle, which is why when it splits and sums, you don't hear any sort of phasiness or any issues, and getting that right was quite challenging, but we did get there. So mostly synthesizers, instruments if they're in the track, claps, snares, things like this. So this track doesn't really need it, but as I push the mids, you'll hear all of those plucky synths just come right through the mix. while this track doesn't necessarily need that, it's a way to pull up all of that without just a big EQ boost in the middle, which would just make the track incredibly intense and probably sound very imbalanced. So it's a way to naturally pull tracks forward and back. If I look quickly to the top end, so this is 2.6 all the way up. So this is what that high module is processing. So this one here. And many people have asked us, why didn't we just have adjustable band splits? So if I take this off, so the question was, why can't users set their own band splits, basically be able to adjust this themselves? The reason for this is that the transient processor is highly adaptive, so it's listening in that whole band, and if there's any transients there that need boosted, it's going to find them. But I have taken this feedback on board, and it's something that, you know, we're considering. It might be added, but I really like the simplicity of keeping it as 3 bands. It's simple, but it's not at all basic. It's searching within each of those bands. It's not just boosting the full band sort of indiscriminately. As I boost this, you'll hear the hi-hats will increase in level, the tops of the claps will be boosted a little bit, but we're not pulling up all of those synth atmospheres. So if I used an EQ, this whole top end would just become very bright, maybe a little bit intense, but with this, we're just boosting those dynamic elements. Again, I'm boosting it quite a lot. And in headphones, you should definitely be able to hear that as quite a dramatic difference. Some feedback that I really am taking on board is many people have asked if we could add like a band solo so that you could just solo the high band and really listen to what it's doing, maybe get a delta of the processed and unprocessed. And actually, I think that's really good feedback. When we do go back in and maybe do a revision of this, it is something that we will strongly consider adding in the future. It's that kind of feedback that I really appreciate. It's not going to change the function or the sound of the plugin, but it might make it a little bit easier for some people to use. The main reason I made this plugin is that I felt a bit let down by traditional tools to do this sort of processing without using EQ and compression. I was having to split the signal, you know, obviously linear phase splits if I was using a signal that I wanted to actually sum together cohesively. I'd be sending things into different plugin chains in the DAW and also analog chains externally, and then trying to sum everything back together. And this worked okay if it was just a single guitar or maybe some drums. But when I started working on anything more complicated, things just never quite summed together perfectly, and trying to get the balance right between low, mid, and high was really challenging. So I thought, why don't I just combine all of this into one plugin that splits and sums perfectly, and then you can just dial it in really simply without having to dive into any really sensitive chains. It took an awful long time to dial this in so that it could be adaptive and a bit intelligent to work on many different genres and types of music. I think in the end, I built something really elegant and simple and easy to use that wasn't basic. It's not a beginner tool, but it can be used by anyone. So a little bit more about the plugins though. Over here, right from the top, we've got the logo. If you open that up, it's going to pull open the owner's manual, which really has all the information you'd need about using the plugin. Really on this page here, it shows you what each of the modules does. If I close that, over here we've got the preset menu. Mine looks a little bit different because I made the presets, but you can go in here, choose different presets. Of course, these are all just starting points. And if you've dialed in a sound you really like, you can of course save it using this button here, and then you'll have it available the next time you open the plugin. Up here now, warning, the screen's going to go quite bright. We have the light mode. I should have mentioned this does not in any way change the sound of the plugin. It just brightens up the display. We all have different eyesight and different needs, so whether you're working at night or during the day, I wanted to make something that was just easy on the eyes. Most of the time, I keep it in the dark mode, but if I'm working during the middle of the day, everything's really bright in the studio, having this can be quite fresh. But again, no change to the sound, it's purely visual. In the mix here, we'll open up my YouTube channel, and if you press the BSA logo up here, it'll show you, of course mine's all blurred here, but it'll show you the license and registration. It was super important to me that we didn't use some sort of licensing dongle or any sort of other software. I just wanted people to be able to put in a code. I think most of us are quite frustrated with cloud licensors and dongles that we have to plug into our computer. just to access the software that we've paid for. I've opened up another project because it's more suited to show you the next couple of features. We've had a lot of good feedback from people using the harmonic circuits on vocals, which is not something they were necessarily designed for, but it actually does sound really nice. They're all even harmonic circuits, although they're tuned a little bit differently. And even if you engage the mid harmonics, they'll still spill into the area covered by the high module. So they're not super contained, which would make them sound unnatural. They can spread across the bands a little bit, just a little bit though. As long as you've engaged this button, there will be some harmonic processing even at 0%, which you should hear kick in depending on the track, but it becomes more dramatic as you push the transient processor. And this means you get the processing and saturation sort of pushing into each other, which I find actually gives a really nice and balanced sound. If you're using the harmonic circuits, I would strongly advise turning on the oversampling here. This is 4 times oversampling, which we found was the best balance during testing. It's really good for the CPU. It's not going to overload anything, and it really limits aliasing because, especially with this high band, you're saturating stuff really close to Nyquist, so you don't want any of those bouncing back, or you want to minimize them as much as possible. So this is really a quality feature. Certainly for when you're applying this on full mixes and masters, I think it's really important, and I wouldn't be without it. A very simple one, input and output gain. I've got a project here where the vocals are very low in level. And the city, it'll swallow you up. You can see they're just barely peaking the meters there. So in this case, you can just drive some gain in and out. So just make sure your meters are somewhere in the middle, nice and healthy, and you'll have no problems with clipping or with the processing not being strong enough. So in this case, the reason I've got some vocals here is that I wanted to show you these harmonic bands, especially the high ones. So if we take a listen to everything together, and I'll solo in on the vocals. And the city, it'll swallow you up. The city, it'll swallow you up. So some really lovely vocals, and these harmonic circuits are designed to bring a little bit more clarity, a little bit more pop into the sound, where you don't really need any transient processing. The processors are still active, but we're not trying to make any of these vocals spiky or anything. We just want to give them a little bit more clarity and presence in the mix. And the city, it'll swallow you up. And off. And the city, it'll swallow you up. And the city, it'll swallow you up. And the city, it'll swallow you up. Push that a lot. The city, it'll swallow you up. The place to be, but not to stay. So it just helps them really stand out and have some more clarity. If I jump over to the drum track here, one of the reasons we added the harmonics is that there's times when tracks are already dynamic enough, but you just want a little bit extra lift and clarity. And in this case, it will pull up a lot of the low detail as well. These drums have great dynamics. I mean, you could push the low a little bit. To be fair, that's a really nice thump there, but the point was they have great dynamics, but maybe you just want to lift the high end a bit, and then you can just engage these circuits. So let's try that. Just so much more lift, and if you drive it a bit, so there was a bit of a level change there. I'll try to adjust that in the edit, but just engaging these harmonics, it gave it that impact, but without dramatically changing the dynamics, because the hi-hats, the snares, they're cutting through so much. If you were to boost this too much, it would probably sound a little bit unpleasant at higher values, although a little bit did sound quite good. Now, something I kept finding during testing is that I'd set a level like this, and then maybe I'd come back the next day and realize that I hadn't done quite enough, or I'd done a little bit too much. And that's why we have this link button here, so that you can just adjust the balance with them all set together. So if you've got a relative balance that you love, hit the link button and you can just dial it in like this. While I was making this, I kept doing this over and over again, adjusting all the bands together, and I thought, why so many clicks? So simple link button, dial it and sort of push the effect to your liking. Loads of little things cropped up like that during testing. It was a really lovely process of trying to figure out how to make this as usable and easy as possible. Earlier I said it's great on a wide variety of tracks, so I want to show that to you instead of just saying it. So here's the bass guitar, then we'll do some normal guitars, I think. That's the tone. I'm going to grab one of the presets. So even though with it turned on, we're clipping into the plugin, it still sounds really great with those low harmonics. I'm going to turn it down a little bit, but those extra harmonics are really going to help this cut through the mix. It's just got so much more aggression and sort of this tubey tone to it. You know, even without running it through an additional amp or something, just driving those low harmonics. Again, you don't really think of transient designing as something to do on a bass guitar, but it just sounds so much better. I'm aware that I'm probably just loading this video with sound examples. I could probably just do this for hours, to be honest, just loading it up on tracks and showing you what it sounds like. But the best way for you to do that is to get the free trial and just check it out yourself, I suppose. Now, I want to say I'm no stranger to coming up with ideas and releasing them out into the world. I do it regularly with these videos. I'm trying to make something useful, unique, usable that will help you with your productions or mixes. But with this plugin, it's been really special. Coming up with this idea, finding this sort of gap in the toolkit, this process I was going through and really struggling with, creating a useful and unique tool to actually fill that gap, and then seeing people actually get better mixes by using this tool that I've created. It's been so special, been completely different experience for me, and I want to thank everyone who has supported me so far by getting Reviver. If you do want to get the plugin, check out that discount code in the description. It'll get you a good percentage off at checkout. If you have any other questions about the plugin, please drop those in the comments section down below, or just message me on Instagram. It's probably the best way to get in contact with me directly. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.